All right, so we're Foggy River Farm, and I guess, are 8 years we've had this farm.
Something
like 8 years. We've lost count. We are, well, I grew up in Toronto, so I'm a first generation farmer, and moved out here eight years ago from the city. So my background is not at all in farming. I went to school for business administration and then worked in marketing, and then made a fairly, I guess, drastic life change.
My name's Phil, and I grew up on a horse farm and went to school for landscape architecture, and then ended up farming and kind of coming back to the land, appreciating permaculture design, and realized that stewarding the land and being a farmer was a far more fulfilling life.
The premise of our farm has always been about connection. So it's interesting, your course name, because even though when we started this farm it was mostly annual vegetables, the sort of like base value system and reason we wanted to have this farm was all about cultivating connection. And so as our farms evolved and what we're selling and growing has evolved, that's always stayed the same. And it was sort of both of us in our respective fields of work were just sort of smacked in the face with how disconnected we are as a society. And sort of from my downtown world of people like going into these office jobs and having no connection to even like why we need rainfall, people complaining about rain and a drought and being just so disconnected.
Yeah, when they say we're having the best weather, but like all the farmers are like, no, this is terrible, all the crops are dying, like we haven't had rain in a month. That's not a good thing.
So disconnection on that level.
It's just one example.
Yeah. And Phil and his work as the landscape architect, and even in that field there being disconnection to land and disconnection to our communities and to our own bodies and to actually what nourishes us. And so sort of a multifaceted rooting in this whole idea of connection. And so, yeah, that was always our goal, was we set out to restore connection. Like in terms of regenerative agriculture, that was the other part of when we started farming, was always having sort of a short-term plan of how do we have cash flow in the short term to sustain ourselves, but always with this long-term outlook of like, we want to get as many perennial crops, trees, fruit trees, nut trees, shrubs in the ground as we can, knowing that we won't be harvesting from those for years or decades. Those will reach maturity when we're in retirement. So sort of this like two-prong approach of, yeah, what can we grow and sell in the short term, and just keep planting trees. So we've planted thousands of perennial crops over the past 8 years, and we'll just keep going with those.
I don't know if it was ever like a conscious like choice, like we're going to be regenerative. Like we've had a set of values that's kind of guided us in our methods, and we both like always want to be doing as like the best job possible at being good stewards, and that happened to be what some people call regenerative or restorative or permaculture or organic. Feels good knowing that we're creating those systems for future humans, whether it's like our daughter, our offspring, our family, our friends, or not. At least those trees are there, and they're going to keep producing nuts, and squirrels will eat them, and like even if long after we're gone, like the things that we did on the land are going to continue to flourish.
Once you see yourself as part of this whole interconnected system, it's sort of hard to unsee it. Like once that clicks for you that we wouldn't be alive without soil and all of the organisms in soil, and without trees, and without, you know, water and air. And once it really clicks of how crucial that is to sustain our life, and you see yourself just as part of this system rather than sort of dominating it, you can't really, it's like you can't go back. We know that we're healthier if our ecosystem's healthy.
I want to be the human that is like barefoot in the forest climbing trees, like that level of health. Not the guy in the tractor with like respiratory illness and heart disease.
We mentioned yet that we are a herb farm now primarily, so we do have the long-term crops, but we actively are farming over 40 medicinal and culinary herbs. So that piece we sort of transitioned about 5 years ago because it sort of spurred out of health issues that I was having, and we were sourcing herbs to help, and realizing they were all imported. And so we were like, oh, we can grow those in Ontario. Why is no one growing them? And out of seeing the benefits we were getting from using these herbs, we were just even more inspired to see if we could grow them. And so we started with a little bit, and we were feeling pretty pumped about just growing herbs and the quality that we were seeing. A lot of the herbs we grow are perennial crops, so it fit with that model of being able to build our soil health and not having to till every year, and being able to sort of incorporate more perennials into what we're doing. And so I guess I think partly to answer your question is we find the quality of the herbs we are growing is so vastly superior to what people are purchasing, to what's in the supply chain. There are other great herb farmers. There's just like the vast majority is really poor quality, and so part of that is our, how we process them, but part of that's also because they're grown in really amazing soil, and so there's a lot of nutrients for our crops to pull, and so that feeds into customer satisfaction. We sell, dried herbal teas, and people have one sip and are like, oh my god, this flavor is amazing, I feel the benefits. The other piece is because we have such a diverse farm, like we've got over 40 crops that we're growing versus a monocrop farm, is that every year the weather does its own thing, and every year some of our crops do really well and some of them get hit with, whether it's too much rain or a drought, really hot spring like this year. We're able to weather that storm of, okay, we're not going to have a lot of this crop this year, but we've got enough diversity that something always thrives.
Yeah.
And so we sort of have that flexibility to roll with that. We might have more of this tea blend this year, less of this one, it'll change next year, and every year, we just have that, the diversity, which is, part of regenerative farming, definitely helps you adapt to climate changes, both year to year and then over the long term.
Last year there was this, like in Durham, and it might have been Ontario-wide, there was this like influx of these Japanese beetles. I forget what they were called, but these big Japanese beetles eating the grape leaves and eating all kind of like defoliating plants as they do. And everyone was like freaking out, all these Japanese beetles, they're eating everything. And they moved on to our grapes at the front and started defoliating the grapes. And then I noticed there was like gaps where there was no defoliation happening and there was no beetles. So I went and looked closer, and there was a tree frog. Wherever there was a gap and there was no beetles, there was a tree frog. So then I looked down the grapevine, and me and Katie counted like 7 or 8 tree frogs just chilling out on our grapevines, and I hadn't seen a tree frog. I've never seen a tree frog in Uxbridge before. I remember seeing them in Picton when I was a kid, but it was like, to see that many, and to see them, like, I'm pretty sure they were eating the beetles. That's the conclusion I drew. But I was like, if we were spraying and tilling and, like, I don't think those frogs would have been there, and I think we would have not had any grapes that year because the beetles would have eaten them all.
In our society, you go to the doctor, you get medicine, you don't really understand what it's doing in your body, you just kind of take it, you hope it works. So we're disconnected from our own bodies in that sense. Like, I think you could, pull a room and say, everyone point to your liver, and most of the people in the room probably can't point to their liver. It's like we can do calculus, but we can't point to our own liver. And so there's just a general disconnection, and so there's something pretty cool about learning the herbs or weeds that grow in our own climate, that anyone with a backyard could have access to this sort of like more gentle, holistic medicine that is literally right at your doorstep, and could, be a real ally in your life. So a lot of what we grow are weeds that a lot of people are weeding out of their lawn, dandelion being a perfect example. We actually cultivate dandelion, and everyone else is, mowing their lawns and picking the dandelion out to get rid of. But dandelion's an amazing herb and supports, I said liver because dandelion supports, your liver in processing toxins, and has a number of other benefits as well.
Dandelion is like super ironic. So there's money now being invested in studying dandelion extract as a cancer preventative and for treating different types of cancer. I haven't seen the studies, I have no idea what the details are. But there's people investing in that research. And then there's people spraying Roundup on the dandelions on their lawn. And then we know Roundup causes cancer. So there's like people spraying the medicine with the poison and going to the doctor, getting their iron pills, because they're anemic. But they sprayed all the iron dandelion. And it's this lack of like connection. Roundup.
Yeah. When it's Roundup Day, you can smell it, you can like almost taste it in the air, and it's...
Oh, you can for sure taste it. You can taste it in your lungs.
It's pretty devastating when you know it's happening. But yeah, we kind of joke. We're like, oh, okay, it's Roundup Day. Like, don't breathe in too heavily today on the farm, because it blows.
To piss off too, because I've struggled with respiratory stuff. I have asthma, had asthma. So I'm like do so much work to make my lungs healthy, like drink Mullen, and then it's like one day I get a big breath full of Roundup from a neighboring farm, and like,
yeah,
that's actually not cool. Like I was working really hard to be healthy, and you just destroyed how long? I don't know. Maybe it's only a day, but the point is, I didn't get to say no before I breathed in your glyphosate.
You could get us going. No. You could get us going about Roundup, but the other piece of it is like we'll always hear these debates, and even with friends, or and socially, like, is there there's no scientifically proven nutritional benefit of organic food over non-organic, and that's always an argument we hear of like, I'm not going to bother buying organic because it's not proven to be nutritionally superior, and that is the piece of disconnection of like, you only see the food you buy as what's going into your body. You forget about the harm that the spraying does to the surrounding communities. And if you think about bananas and the planes flying over in Costa Rica or wherever the bananas are grown, literally flying over, spraying the banana farms, and all of those communities and the sickness and all of the people who don't live on those farms but are getting sprayed with these chemicals. And so I don't really care if the banana is nutritionally superior or not. I care about the fact that if I buy non-organic, I am indirectly spraying people with chemicals who've not asked for it. You learn about like these villages that have these cancer rates that never had cancer before because they're near these farms where they're flying airplanes over. So it goes beyond that. Like how big does your world go? Is it just what you put in your body? You might not be sick, yet there's like a whole ripple effect